Exodus chapter 20, verse 18 through 26. Now when all the people saw the thunder and the flashes of lightning, and the sound of the trumpet, and the mountain smoking, the people were afraid and trembled, and they stood far off. And said to Moses, You speak to us, and we will listen, but do not let God speak to us, lest we die. Moses said to the people, Do not fear, for God has come to test you, that the fear of him may be before you, that you may not sin. The people stood far off, while Moses drew near to the thick darkness where God was. And the Lord said to Moses, Thus you shall say to the people of Israel, You have seen for yourselves that I have talked with you from heaven. You shall not make gods of silver to be with me, nor shall you make for yourselves gods of gold. An altar of earth you shall make for me, and sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and your peace offerings, your sheep and your oxen. In every place where I cause my name to be remembered, I will come to you and bless you. If you make me an altar of stone, you shall not build it of hewn stones, for if you wield your tool on it, you profane it. And you shall not go up by steps to my altar, that your nakedness not be exposed on it. In today's passage, we see Israel in fear of God's presence, and God desiring to meet with his people. Although it may seem as though fear may draw the Israelites further away from God, it works to keep Israel away from sin and remain in God's holiness. After this brief commotion, Moses approaches God and receives God's instruction for the people of Israel. First, God reveals that Israel ought to have a righteous relationship with God, which means that there ought to be no other gods between this relationship. Also, God gives instruction for the altar and burnt offerings. This was to be a fellowship offering unto the Lord, which meant that God wants to have an intimate relationship with Israel, akin to having a shared meal with someone very close. God wants to establish a deep relationship between himself and his worshippers. With this in mind, God warns Israelites to refrain from using certain tools and profaning themselves before God. Overall, today's passage shows us God's desire to be in an intimate relationship with his people. Even though Israelites cannot approach God due to their sin, God is willing to overlook their sin through animal sacrifices in order that they can come before God. Before the Holy One, however, we cannot be like the people of the world who show their nakedness as a sign of fleshly desire. Rather, as God's holy people, we are to be holy just as he is holy. Although God had commanded Israelites of external actions, God's command is to see whether they would follow God, for God sees not the outward appearance of religious acts, but the inner heart of the person. 1 Samuel 16 verse 7 says, But the Lord said to Samuel, Do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. As we meditate on today's passage, let us fix our gaze to the one who desires to be in a holy relationship with us and draw near to him as he calls us through his words.